The autumn chill that swept through Silver Creek, Colorado, in 1878 carried with it the scent of desperation and dying dreams. Petunia Halloway stood at the altar of the town's only church, her trembling fingers clutching a small bouquet of wilted wildflowers as she gazed up at Walter Simmons, a man 30 years her senior with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty that stretched across the territory. At 22, she had never imagined her wedding day would feel like a funeral for her own soul. "Do you, Petunia, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the preacher asked, his voice echoing in the nearly empty church. Petunia's eyes darted to the back row where her ailing father sat, his once strong frame now withered from consumption, his medical bills mounting with each passing day. There was no choice to make. Not really. Not when Walter Simmons had offered to pay for her father's medicine and keep a roof over their heads in exchange for her hand. "I do," she whispered, the words tasting like ashes on her tongue. 2 months later, Petunia stood in the doorway of the sprawling ranch house that had become her prison, watching the first snowfall of the season blanket the landscape. Walter had departed 3 days prior for a business trip to Denver, leaving her alone with nothing but the echo of his parting words. "Don't get any foolish notions while I'm gone, wife. You're mine now, paid for fair and square." She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, watching as a lone rider appeared on the horizon, making his way toward the ranch through the swirling snow. As the figure drew closer, she recognized one of Walter's ranch hands, the new one, who'd started just before her wedding. The tall, broad-shouldered cowboy with kind eyes who barely spoke, but worked harder than 3 men combined. Petunia retreated inside, hastily preparing coffee and setting out some bread and preserves. The ranch hands rarely came to the main house, but in this weather, offering shelter was only decent. A few minutes later, a knock sounded at the door. "Madam," the cowboy said, removing his snow-dusted hat as she opened the door. "Pardon the intrusion. Mr. Simmons asked me to check on you. Make sure the property's secure with this storm coming." "Of course, Mr." She realized she didn't know his name, though she'd seen him countless times from a distance. Griffin Porter, madam," he replied, stomping the snow from his boots before stepping inside. "Most just call me Griff." "Please, come warm yourself, Mr. Porter," she said, gesturing toward the fireplace. "I've made coffee." Griff hesitated but followed her into the kitchen, his tall frame making the space feel suddenly smaller. Up close, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, not from age but from squinting against the sun. He couldn't be more than 26 or 27. "Thank you kindly," he said, accepting the steaming cup she offered. "Storm's looking to be a bad one. Might last a couple days." Petunia nodded, maintaining a proper distance. "How are the cattle faring?" "Moved them to the sheltered pasture yesterday. They'll weather it well enough." He paused, studying her face. "If you don't mind my saying so, madam, you look tired." The unexpected concern in his voice nearly undid her. No one had asked about her welfare in months. "I'm fine, Mr. Porter. Just the change in weather, I suppose." Griff took a sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sometimes, madam, fine is just what folks say when they've forgotten what better feels like." Her breath caught. "That's quite an observation from someone I've barely spoken to." "I see more than people think," he replied simply, "including how you look at this place like it's a cage." Petunia set down her cup with a clatter. "Mr. Porter, that's highly inappropriate. My apologies, madam," he said quickly. "Wasn't my place to speak so freely." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the howling wind outside. Finally, Petunia spoke. "My father died last week." Griff's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. Walter didn't think it proper for me to attend the funeral. Said grief makes women unpredictable." She didn't know why she was telling him this, perhaps because he was the first person in months to look at her as if she mattered. "That wasn't right," Griff said, his voice low. "No one should be denied saying goodbye." Petunia turned away, blinking back tears. "It doesn't matter now. Nothing does. Everything matters, Mrs. Simmons. Especially the things that break our hearts." He stood, placing his empty cup on the table. "I should see to the horses before the storm worsens." As he moved toward the door, he paused. "If you need anything at all, I'll be in the bunkhouse." "Thank you, Mr. Porter," she replied formally, though something in his steady gaze made her heart beat faster. After he left, Petunia stood at the window watching his retreating figure until it was swallowed by the swirling snow. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar stir within her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as interest in someone other than her own misery. The blizzard raged for 3 days, stranding Walter in Denver and leaving Petunia alone at the ranch except for the hands who stayed in the bunkhouse. Each morning, Griff would trudge through the snow to check on her, bringing firewood and making sure she had everything she needed. Their conversations remained brief, proper, but Petunia found herself looking forward to his visits, to the quiet respect in his voice that made her feel human again. On the 4th morning, the storm finally broke, revealing a world transformed by pristine white. Petunia was in the kitchen kneading dough when she heard the now familiar knock. "Good morning, Mr. Porter," she said, wiping flour from her hands as she opened the door. "Mrs. Simmons," he greeted, his breath visible in the cold air. "Just wanted to let you know the road to town's been cleared. Telegraph lines are back up too. Mr. Simmons sent word he'll be returning tomorrow." "Oh." She couldn't hide the disappointment in her voice. "Thank you for letting me know." Griff hesitated, then said, "I also came to ask if you might like to get some fresh air. Being cooped up so long isn't good for the spirit." Petunia knew she should refuse. A proper wife didn't go walking alone with men who weren't her husband. But the thought of one more day confined within these walls was unbearable. "I'd like that very much," she said, reaching for her coat and bonnet. They walked in companionable silence, their boots crunching in the snow. The world sparkled around them, sunlight catching on ice-coated branches and transforming the ordinary landscape into something magical. "Look there," Griff said, pointing to a cluster of trees where a family of deer carefully picked their way through the snow. "They made it through the worst of it. They're beautiful," Petunia whispered, watching the animals' graceful movements. "Life finds a way, even in the harshest conditions," Griff said. "My pa used to say that." "Where is your family, Mr. Porter?" she asked, realizing how little she knew about him. "Lost pa to a mining accident when I was 15. Ma passed from fever 2 years later. Been on my own since, working ranches from Texas to Montana." He glanced at her. "What about you?" "Before." He didn't need to finish the sentence. "My mother died when I was small. It was just my father and me. He was a schoolteacher, brilliant and kind." Her voice softened with memory. "When he fell ill, the medical bills. Well, Walter offered a solution. You married him out of despair," Griff stated, not a question but an understanding. Petunia stopped walking, startled by his directness. "Yes," she admitted, the word barely audible. "I had no choice." Griff turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Then let me show you hope." Her heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "I mean there's always a choice, Mrs. Simmons. Always a way forward, even when you can't see it." He gestured to the vast expanse of snow-covered land around them. This storm felt like it would never end, but here we are, standing in sunshine. "Some storms don't pass so easily," she replied, thinking of Walter's return the next day. "No," Griff agreed. "But that doesn't mean we surrender to them." He picked up a handful of snow, compressing it between gloved hands. "Even the hardest winter holds the promise of spring." As they walked back to the ranch, Petunia felt something shift within her, a tiny seed of possibility taking root. That evening, alone in the house, she found herself standing taller, breathing deeper, as if some invisible weight had begun to lift. Walter returned the following afternoon, his mood foul from the delayed journey. He barely acknowledged Petunia beyond demanding his dinner and complaining about business matters in Denver. That night, when he came to her bedroom, his touch felt more repulsive than ever. She closed her eyes and thought of sun-sparkled snow and deer moving silently through trees. The days fell into a familiar pattern. Walter spent his time either away on business or closeted in his study with ledgers and whiskey. Petunia maintained the house and gardens, her only respite the occasional glimpse of Griff working with the horses or mending fences in the distance. They were careful never to speak directly again, communicating only through brief nods or glances when circumstances brought them into proximity. Yet something had changed. Where once Petunia had moved through her days like a ghost, Now she found herself noticing details: the first green shoots pushing through soil in her garden, the changing patterns of clouds overhead, the way the ranch hands respected Griff's quiet authority. She began to read again, borrowing books from town when Walter sent her for supplies. She started keeping a small journal, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom. Spring arrived in earnest, bringing with it new life across the ranch. One afternoon, while Walter was in town, Petunia ventured to the stables to see a new foal she'd heard the hands discussing at breakfast. She found Griff there, gently stroking the wobbly-legged creature while its mother watched cautiously. "She's beautiful," Petunia said, keeping her distance to avoid startling the animals. Griff looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "She is born just after midnight. Strongest little filly I've seen in years. What will you name her?" He considered for a moment. "How about Hope?" Their eyes met, and the air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken words. Petunia's cheeks warmed. "It suits her. Mrs. Simmons." Walter's voice shattered the moment, his imposing figure appearing in the stable doorway. "What are you doing out here?" Petunia straightened, her heart racing. "I heard about the new foal and wanted to see her." Walter's gaze shifted between her and Griff, his expression darkening. "You have duties in the house. This is no place for a lady." "Yes, of course," she replied, lowering her eyes as she'd learned to do to avoid his anger. "I was just leaving." "Porter," Walter barked, "when you're done playing nursemaid to that horse, fix the fence in the north pasture. It's been down for days." "Already repaired it yesterday, sir," Griff replied evenly. Walter scowled. "Then find something else useful to do. I don't pay you to stand around chatting." Petunia followed Walter back to the house, feeling his suspicious gaze on her back. That evening, he questioned her relentlessly about her activities during his absence, inspecting the house for evidence of neglect. Finding nothing to criticize, he eventually retreated to his study, but not before issuing a warning. "Remember your place, Petunia. I won't have you embarrassing me by fraternizing with the help." That night, Petunia lay awake, her mind racing. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge the feeling that had been growing inside her: not just hope, but something deeper, more dangerous. She was falling in love with Griff Porter. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, it filled her with a strange calm. She couldn't act on these feelings, couldn't risk the consequences, but knowing they existed made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. The following weeks brought subtle changes to the ranch. Walter began spending more time at home, watching Petunia with narrowed eyes. He reassigned Griff to the farthest pastures, keeping him away from the main house. The other hands grew quiet when Petunia approached, eyes averted, as if sensing the tension. One evening in late May, Walter announced they would be hosting a dinner for business associates from Denver. "I expect everything to be perfect," he told Petunia. "These men can make or break my future investments." Petunia spent days preparing, cleaning the house until it gleamed, and planning an elaborate meal. On the morning of the dinner, she rode into town for last-minute supplies, her mind so occupied with recipes and table arrangements that she didn't notice the commotion near the sheriff's office until she was almost upon it. A crowd had gathered, watching as several men loaded a prisoner into a transport wagon. Curiosity drew her closer, and her blood froze when she recognized Griff, his face bloodied, hands shackled before him. "What's happening?" she asked a woman standing nearby. "That ranch hand's been arrested for theft," the woman replied. "Stole a valuable watch from his employer, Walter Simmons. Sheriff caught him trying to sell it at the pawn shop." Petunia felt dizzy with disbelief. There must be some mistake. Mr. Porter wouldn't. "Mrs. Simmons." Walter's voice cut through her protest. He appeared beside her, taking her arm in a grip just shy of painful. "You shouldn't be witnessing this unpleasantness. Come along." As he led her away, Petunia caught Griff's gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet resolve that steadied her racing heart. "I don't understand," she said when they were alone in their carriage. "How could Griff have stolen from us?" Walter's mouth formed a thin, satisfied line. "People aren't always what they seem, my dear. I've suspected Porter was a thief for some time. Set a trap, and he walked right into it." Something in his tone made Petunia's skin crawl. "What trap?" "Left my grandfather's gold watch in plain sight on my desk, told the hands I'd be gone all day. had the sheriff watching the pawn shop. He patted her hand condescendingly. Don't waste your concern on him. He'll get what he deserves, 10 years hard labor, at least. That night, as their dinner guests laughed and drank, Petunia moved through the evening like a sleepwalker, serving food and smiling emptily while her mind raced. She knew, with bone-deep certainty, that Griff was innocent. Walter's smug satisfaction told her everything she needed to know. He had set Griff up, probably suspecting something between them. After the guests departed and Walter fell into a drunken sleep, Petunia crept to his study. The watch supposedly stolen sat in plain sight on his desk. She examined it closely, noting the inscription inside. To Walter, with admiration. JB. The date was just 3 months earlier, hardly a family heirloom. Heart-pounding, Petunia made a decision. Returning to her room, she packed a small bag with essentials and the little money she'd managed to save from household accounts. Before dawn, she slipped out of the house and made her way to town on foot, arriving as the first businesses began to open. The sheriff was unsympathetic to her pleas. Mrs. Simmons, with all due respect, your husband's presented evidence. Porter was caught red-handed trying to sell the watch. But it's not an heirloom, she insisted. I can prove Walter received it recently. That doesn't change the fact your husband's pressing charges, the sheriff replied. The prisoner's already been transferred to the territorial jail in Denver to await trial. Defeated, Petunia left the sheriff's office, her mind whirling with desperate thoughts. She couldn't return to the ranch. Walter would know immediately what she'd tried to do. She had little money, no family, nowhere to go. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her again. Then she remembered Griff's words. There's always a choice. With newfound determination, she walked to the telegraph office and sent a message to the only person who might help Walter's sister, Eliza, who lived in Denver. Though they'd met only once at the wedding, Eliza had shown Petunia unexpected kindness, slipping her a note with her address and a whispered offer of assistance if ever needed. By midday, Petunia had secured a seat on the stagecoach to Denver, leaving behind everything she'd known for an uncertain future. As Silver Creek disappeared behind her, she felt not fear but a strange exhilaration. For the first time in years, she was making her own choices. The journey to Denver took 2 days, during which Petunia barely slept, her mind consumed with plans and worries. What if Eliza turned her away? What if she couldn't help Griff? What if Walter found her? Eliza Simmons Carter lived in a modest but well-maintained house on the outskirts of Denver. When Petunia arrived, dusty and exhausted, Eliza opened the door with surprise that quickly turned to understanding. I wondered when you might come, she said, ushering Petunia inside. Or if you ever would. Over tea, Petunia poured out her story: the loveless marriage, Walter's cruelty, and finally, Griff's arrest on false charges. I believe you, Eliza said when she'd finished. My brother has always twisted the truth to serve his purposes. Our father was the same way. She reached across the table to squeeze Petunia's hand. You can stay here as long as you need. As for your cowboy, I have a friend whose husband is a judge. Perhaps he can help us understand what we're facing. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Eliza's friend, Judge Thomas Crawford, confirmed that Griff's situation was dire. Without evidence contradicting Walter's claim, and with the testimony of the pawnbroker who'd received the watch, Griff would almost certainly be convicted. There is one possibility, the judge said during a discreet meeting in Eliza's parlor. If we could prove the watch wasn't a family heirloom but a recent gift, it might cast doubt on Simmons' testimony. I saw the inscription, Petunia said eagerly. To Walter, with admiration. JB dated just 3 months ago. Judge Crawford frowned thoughtfully. JB could be James Blackburn, a businessman from St. Louis who's been investing in Colorado mining operations. If he gave Walter the watch, he could testify to that effect. How do we find him? Petunia asked. He stays at the Grand Hotel when in Denver. I can make inquiries. Hope flickered anew, but their plan hit an immediate obstacle. James Blackburn had returned to St. Louis the previous week, not expected back for months. Meanwhile, Griff's trial was scheduled for just 2 weeks hence. We need more time, Eliza said, pacing Petunia's borrowed bedroom that evening. Or another approach. Petunia stared out the window at the darkening sky. Could we send a telegraph to Mr. Blackburn in St. Louis? We could, but his testimony would carry more weight in person. Eliza sighed. And there's no guarantee he'd remember the watch or be willing to contradict Walter's story. A knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Eliza returned moments later, her expression grim. You have a visitor. Walter is here. Petunia's heart lurched. How did he find me? I suspect he tried the most obvious place first. Eliza's voice hardened. You don't have to see him. I can send him away. Petunia took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. No, I need to face him. Walter stood in Eliza's parlor, hat in hand, his expression a practiced mask of concern. Petunia, my dear, I've been so worried. When you disappeared. Don't pretend, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. You know why I left. His facade cracked slightly, eyes narrowing. Because of that thief? I didn't realize you'd formed such an attachment. Griff Porter is innocent. You framed him because you suspected there was something between us. She met his gaze unflinchingly. But you were wrong about that too. Until you had him arrested, he was nothing more than a kind man who once showed me compassion when I needed it most. Walter's laugh held no humor. How touching. Unfortunately for both of you, the evidence says otherwise. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Come home, Petunia. Whatever foolish notion that cowboy put in your head, it's time to remember your place and our vows. Our vows. Anger surged through her. You purchased me like livestock when I had no other choice. That's not a marriage. It's legally binding, regardless of your romantic notions. His tone hardened. I'm prepared to be generous, Petunia. Come home now, and I'll drop the charges against Porter. He can leave the territory with his freedom, if not his reputation. The offer staggered her. She could save Griff, give him back his future at the cost of her own. And if I refuse? Walter's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then he'll serve his full sentence. 10 years is a long time. Many don't survive half that in territorial prison. You're despicable, Eliza interjected, stepping to Petunia's side. Stay out of this, sister, Walter snapped. This is between my wife and me. He turned back to Petunia. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. I'll be at the Denver House Hotel. After he left, Petunia collapsed into a chair, trembling. What do I do? I can't let Griff go to prison for something he didn't do. Eliza knelt beside her. And I can't let you sacrifice yourself to my brother's cruelty again. She took Petunia's hands in hers. There must be another way. That night, Petunia tossed in bed, Walter's ultimatum echoing in her mind. As dawn approached, she made her decision. Dressing quietly, she left a note for Eliza explaining her plan, then slipped out of the house. The Denver House Hotel was one of the city's finest establishments, its lobby already bustling with early morning activity when Petunia arrived. She sent a message to Walter's room, requesting he meet her in the public garden behind the hotel. He appeared 20 minutes later, satisfaction evident in his stride. I knew you'd make the sensible choice. I haven't agreed to anything yet, Petunia replied. I need to see Griffin first. To explain. Walter frowned. That wasn't part of our arrangement. It is now? I want to see him, then I want to witness you dropping the charges, in writing, before I return to the ranch. After a moment's consideration, Walter nodded. Very well. The territorial jail isn't far. We can go now. The prison was a grim stone building on the outskirts of Denver. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and desperation. Walter spoke briefly with a guard, who led them to a small room used for meetings with lawyers. 5 minutes, the guard said, closing the door behind him. Moments later, the opposite door opened, and Griff was brought in. Petunia gasped at the sight of him, thinner, with a yellowing bruise along his jaw, but still standing tall. When he saw her, his eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed when Walter stepped into view. What is this? Griff asked, his voice hoarse. I came to help you, Petunia said quickly. Walter has agreed to drop the charges. In exchange for what? Griff's gaze shifted between them, understanding dawning. No, Petunia, don't do this. It's already done, Walter interjected smugly. My wife has remembered where her loyalty belongs. Your wife deserves more than being treated as property, Griff replied, his voice low but intense. He turned to Petunia. Whatever hope I tried to show you, it wasn't this. Not sacrificing yourself. I can't let you spend years in prison for something you didn't do, she whispered. And I can't let you spend years in a different kind of prison, he countered. Not for me. Walter cleared his throat impatiently. This touching reunion has gone on long enough. Guard. As the guard appeared to take Griff back to his cell, he held Petunia's gaze. Remember what I told you about storms passing? Have faith. The walk back to the hotel passed in silence, Petunia's mind racing. At the entrance, Walter stopped. Pack your things from Eliza's. The afternoon stage leaves for Silver Creek at 3 o'clock. The charges, she reminded him. You promised to drop them first. Walter's smile didn't reach his eyes. And I will, once we're home. Insurance, my dear, to ensure you keep your end of our bargain. Fury rose within her. You're lying. You never intended to free him. I intended to reclaim what's mine, he replied coldly. The thief's fate is secondary. Now, I have business to attend to. I expect you at the stage depot, bags packed, at 2:30. He walked away, leaving Petunia standing alone, her brief hope crumbling to dust. She had failed Griff and condemned herself to a lifetime of misery for nothing. Returning to Eliza's house, she found Judge Crawford waiting with Eliza in the parlor, their expressions serious. Petunia, what were you thinking, meeting Walter alone? Eliza demanded. Through tears, Petunia explained Walter's false promise and her visit to the jail. I've made everything worse, she concluded. Walter never intended to help Griff, and now he expects me to return to the ranch today. Judge Crawford leaned forward. Perhaps not all is lost. While you were gone, I received a response to our inquiries about the watch. James Blackburn will be arriving in Denver tonight on business earlier than expected. Hope flared anew. He could testify at Griff's trial. Yes, if he's willing, the judge agreed. But we still need evidence connecting the watch to him. The inscription, Petunia said. If we could show him the watch, he might recognize it. Which means we need to get it from Walter, Eliza concluded. A plan began to form in Petunia's mind. Walter's staying at the Denver house. He mentioned having business this morning, which means his room might be empty. Judge Crawford frowned. Breaking into his hotel room would be illegal, not to mention dangerous if you're caught. Not breaking in, Petunia corrected. I'm still legally his wife. If I told the hotel staff I left something in my husband's room. Eliza looked uncertain. It's risky. Everything is risky now, Petunia replied. But if it could save Griff. After further discussion, they agreed Petunia would try to access Walter's room while Eliza arranged a meeting with James Blackburn upon his arrival. Judge Crawford, though uncomfortable with portions of their plan, promised to be ready if they secured evidence. Returning to the Denver house, Petunia approached the front desk with practiced composure. Good morning. My husband, Walter Simmons, is staying here. I need to retrieve my shawl from his room, but he's in meetings all morning. The clerk hesitated. Mr. Simmons didn't register with a wife, madam. We arrived separately. I've been staying with his sister, she explained smoothly, producing her wedding ring as evidence. It's quite important the shawl was my mother's. After a moment's consideration, the clerk nodded. Room 214, madam. I can have someone escort you. That won't be necessary, Petunia assured him. I won't be but a moment. Heart pounding, she climbed the stairs to the second floor. Outside room 214, she paused, listening for any sound within. Hearing nothing, she knocked softly. When no response came, she inserted the key the clerk had provided and slipped inside. Walter's belongings were meticulously organized, his travel case open on a stand near the window. Petunia searched quickly, conscious of every passing second. She found the watch in an inner pocket of his jacket, hanging in the wardrobe. Relief flooded through her as she confirmed the inscription. To Walter, with admiration. JB, followed by the date. Tucking the watch into her reticule, she left the room, returning the key to the front desk with a grateful smile. Only when she was several blocks away did she allow herself to breathe normally again. By early evening, all the pieces were in place. James Blackburn had arrived in Denver and, intrigued by Eliza's message, agreed to meet them at Judge Crawford's home. When shown the watch, his eyebrows rose in recognition. Yes, I gave this to Walter Simmons after he helped broker a particularly profitable mining deal. It's not especially valuable, certainly not a family heirloom. He frowned. Why does this matter? Judge Crawford explained the situation, watching Blackburn's expression grow increasingly troubled. So Simmons claimed this watch was a family heirloom stolen by one of his workers? Blackburn shook his head in disgust. I'm happy to testify to the truth. No man should go to prison on such a lie. With Blackburn's statement in hand, Judge Crawford acted quickly, contacting the district attorney and arranging an emergency hearing for the following morning. Petunia spent a sleepless night at Eliza's, alternating between hope and fear. Walter would know by now that she had taken the watch and failed to appear for the stagecoach. His retribution would be swift and merciless if their plan failed. The courthouse was crowded when they arrived the next morning. Walter was already there, his face thunderous when he spotted Petunia. He started toward her, only to be intercepted by Judge Crawford. Not now, Simmons. The hearing is about to begin. The proceedings moved with unexpected speed. James Blackburn's testimony was clear and unequivocal. The watch had been a recent gift, not a family heirloom as Walter had claimed. When confronted with this evidence, the pawnbroker admitted he couldn't be certain Griff Porter was the man who had tried to sell the watch, only that someone matching his general description had come to his shop. The district attorney, faced with the collapse of his case, moved to dismiss all charges. When the judge granted the motion, Petunia felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. As the courtroom emptied, Walter approached her, fury etched in every line of his face. You've made a grave mistake, Petunia. You're still my wife. I can make your life a living hell. Before she could respond, Griff Porter appeared behind him, freshly released and escorted by a deputy. No, you can't, Griff said quietly. Because she's not going back with you. Walter turned, momentarily startled by Griff's appearance. This doesn't concern you, Porter. You've been released. I suggest you leave town before I find another reason to have you arrested. Your threats don't work anymore, Petunia said, finding strength in Griff's steady presence. I'm not returning to Silver Creek. I'm filing for divorce. Walter's laugh was harsh. On what grounds? No judge will grant it. Cruelty, Judge Crawford interjected, joining their circle. False imprisonment. Possibly fraud, if we examine those business deals of yours more closely. His expression hardened. I have friends throughout the territorial judiciary, Simmons. If Mrs. Simmons seeks a divorce, I can ensure she receives a fair hearing. Walter's gaze darted between them, calculating his options. Finally, he straightened his jacket with forced dignity. Keep her, then. A disloyal wife is worse than none at all. He leaned closer to Petunia. But don't expect to receive a single penny from me. You'll have nothing. As he stormed away, Petunia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. I already have everything I need, she murmured. The months that followed were not easy. Divorce proceedings, even with Judge Crawford's assistance, moved slowly through the territorial courts. Walter contested every claim, determined to make the process as painful as possible. But with each passing week, Petunia grew stronger, more certain of her path. She found work as a teacher's assistant at a small school near Eliza's home, her father's lessons finally put to good use. In the evenings, she helped Eliza with her charitable work among Denver's less fortunate. And whenever possible, she spent time with Griff, who had found employment at a nearby ranch. Their relationship developed slowly, cautiously. Though the attraction between them was undeniable, both carried wounds that needed healing. They spoke honestly about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. Each conversation, each shared moment, strengthened the bond between them. Finally, on a crisp autumn day, almost exactly 1 year after Petunia had first met Griff Porter, her divorce was granted. That evening, they walked along the banks of the South Platte River, the setting sun painting the water gold. What will you do now? Griff asked, his hand warm around hers. You could continue teaching. You're good at it. Petunia smiled. I enjoy it, but I've been thinking about something else. She hesitated. The land my father left me in Texas, it's not much, but it's mine free and clear. I received a letter from a neighbor saying the old house is still standing. Texas. Griff raised an eyebrow. That's a long journey. It is, she agreed, watching his expression carefully. And I need help restoring the place. Someone who knows about ranching, perhaps. A slow smile spread across his face. I might know someone with those qualifications. Would this someone consider a partnership? She asked, her heart beating faster. Equal shares, equal say in everything. Griff stopped walking, turning to face her fully. I'd consider much more than that, Petunia Halloway. He took both her hands in his. I love you. I think I have since that snowy day when you looked at me like I was worth something. You showed me hope when I had none, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. You helped me find strength I didn't know I possessed. You found that strength yourself, he corrected gently. I just reminded you it was there. As the last rays of sunlight gilded the landscape around them, Griff knelt before her. I don't have much to offer except my heart and my hands. But if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day building a life with you that's filled with not just hope, but joy. Yes, Petunia answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. They were married 2 weeks later in Eliza's garden, surrounded by the few close friends they'd made in Denver. As Petunia spoke her vows freely chosen, this time she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate young woman who had married without love to save her father, to the strong, independent person who now joined her life to Griffin Porter's by choice, with love abundant. The journey to Texas took nearly a month, but when they finally crested the hill overlooking the small, weathered house that had been her childhood home, Petunia felt a sense of completion. The land around it was good, neglected but fertile, with a creek running along the eastern boundary and enough pasture for the modest herd they planned to raise. It needs work, Griff observed, his arm around her waist as they surveyed their new home. Yes, she agreed. But we have time. And each other. That first year tested them in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Drought threatened their young crops. A band of cattle rustlers targeted neighboring ranches. The roof leaked during spring rains, and the well needed deepening. But with each challenge came growth. They learned to trust each other's judgment, to compromise when they disagreed, to laugh even when exhaustion pulled at their bones. Slowly, the old house transformed into a home. Fields that had lain fallow for years produced wheat and corn. Their small herd grew, with Griff's careful management and breeding. On their first anniversary, they sat on the porch swing Griff had built, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in impossible colors. Do you ever regret it? Petunia asked, her head resting on his shoulder. Leaving Colorado? Taking on all this work? Griff's arm tightened around her. Not for a single moment. He placed his hand gently on her rounded belly, where their first child grew. Everything I want is right here. Petunia covered his hand with hers, feeling the baby kick beneath their joined fingers. I used to think hope was just a pretty word, something people talked about, but that didn't exist in the real world. And now? Griff asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. She smiled, remembering that snowy day so long ago when a kind-eyed cowboy had promised to show her hope. Now I know it's the most real thing there is. It's what we create together every day. As twilight deepened around them, Petunia Halloway Porter understood that the journey from despair to hope wasn't a straight line, but a winding path, and that sometimes the darkest moments led to the brightest futures. She had married out of desperation once, only to find true love where she least expected it. And in that love, she had found not just hope, but home. 5 years later, their ranch, which they had named Hope's Horizon, had prospered beyond their initial dreams. Their modest herd had tripled in size, their crops were sought after at market, and the once weathered house stood proud and well-maintained at the center of their land. Their family had grown too. 3-year-old Eliza, named after the woman who had helped make their happiness possible, chased her older brother Thomas through tall summer grass. And in the cradle on the porch, 2-month-old James slept peacefully, his tiny hand curled around his mother's finger. As Petunia watched Griff teaching Thomas to throw a lasso, the boy's aim hilariously wide, but his determination unwavering, she reflected on the strange, beautiful journey that had brought her here. The young woman who had once stood trembling at an altar, sacrificing herself for her father's care, would hardly recognize the life she now led. "Penny for your thoughts," Griff said, coming to sit beside her as Thomas ran off to practice his new skill. Petunia smiled at the nickname only he used. "I was just thinking about how different everything turned out from what I'd expected." "Disappointed?" he teased, knowing the answer. She leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of sunshine and leather that always clung to him. "Gratified." "Amazed." She looked up at him, still handsome despite the laugh lines that now framed his eyes. "When I married Walter, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I could be this happy." Griff pressed a kiss to her forehead. You deserved happiness all along. I'm just glad I got to be part of it." From the distance came a child's delighted shriek as Thomas successfully looped his rope around a fence post. Little Eliza clapped her hands in excitement, demanding her turn to try. "You're not just part of it," Petunia said, watching their children with a heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "You're the foundation of it all. You and these beautiful children." As the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting their land in gold and amber, Petunia knew with absolute certainty that the hope Griffin Porter had promised to show her that snowy day in Colorado had blossomed into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a life built on love, respect, and shared dreams, a legacy they would pass to their children and, someday, their children's children. The girl who had married out of despair had found not just hope, but joy beyond measure. And for that, she would be forever grateful.